Surely at some point in your life you've had a dream, something you've poured your heart into, only to have it taken away from you in the blink of an eye. It's a devastating feeling. And the man known as the King of Country knows it better than anyone. Before he picked up a violin, Roy Acuff was a star baseball player with a big league future. Music isn't the dream, it's what comes after it's shattered. Today we explore the incredible story of how a devastating illness extinguished a man's athletic aspirations, but inadvertently created a musical legend. This is the story of how Roy Acuff became the soul of the Grand Ole Opry, and the quiet battle he fought when the music world he helped build threatened to leave him behind. To truly understand the world of Roy Acuff, we must return to the America where he was born in 1903. It was Appalachia, a land of fierce independence and a culture woven from the threads of Scots-Irish folk, English ballads, and the deep faith of the Bible Belt. Music was not a commodity. It was a way of life. It was a vehicle for storytelling for a people whose history had largely not been written. The early 20th century was a time of great upheaval. The country was still recovering from the scars of the Civil War, and the Industrial Revolution was beginning to draw people away from their rural roots and into the growing cities. Then the Great Depression hit, a disaster that swept across the country, hitting rural communities like a hammer. For millions of hardworking people, life was a daily struggle for survival. And in times of hardship, people turned to two things for comfort: faith and music. The songs of this era were not flashy and glamorous. They were about real life. And then a new miracle crept into every American home: the radio. It was more than a piece of furniture. It was a lifeline, a magical box that brought the wider world into isolated farmhouses and small-town living rooms. In 1925, a Nashville radio station, WSM, short for We Shield Millions, the slogan of its parent insurance company, launched a simple warehouse dance show. They called it the Grand Ole Opry. It was neither slick nor flashy. It was raw, energetic, and down-to-earth. It featured string bands, gospel quartets, and folk comedians, and it touched the hearts of listeners across the South and Midwest. The Opry became a Saturday night ritual, a cultural touchstone that affirmed the values and experiences of its audience. It was in this world, a world of hardship, faith, and the nascent power of radio, that a young athlete with a strong right arm was about to change his life. Roy Claxton Acuff was born on September 15, 1903, in Maynardville, a small town in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, USA. He was the third of 5 children, born to Simon E. Neal Acuff, a multi-talented man who served as a Baptist minister, lawyer, and local postmaster. Roy's father was not only a dedicated preacher, often leading religious services with lively sermons, but also a part-time violinist, often playing traditional Southern folk music at family and community gatherings. The sounds of his father's violin, combined with the solemn atmosphere of the local churches, provided Roy with an early cultural foundation, but they were not enough to pull him away from his true childhood passion, the basketball court and other sports. From an early age, Roy was an energetic, athletic, and competitive boy. He excelled not only in basketball but also in baseball, with his ability to run fast, field hard, and throw accurately. A naturally gifted athlete at his local high school, Roy devoted much of his youthful energy to games on the dusty fields of Tennessee, where he often led his team to victory in local tournaments. He dreamed of one day leaving the rough farm fields, red dirt roads, and simple life of Maynardville and entering the professional world with its large stadiums, perfectly manicured lawns, bright lights, and raucous crowds. It was not a teenage fantasy, it was entirely possible. By his late teens, around 1920 to 1921, Roy had become a prominent local sports star, attracting the attention of professional scouts. He was invited to try out for semi-pro baseball teams and even had a chance with the New York Yankees, one of the biggest teams at the time. But fate, as it often did, had a cruel twist, especially when it struck a young man at the height of his vitality and ambition. In 1929, while on a fishing and coaching trip to Florida with the Knoxville Smokies baseball team, where Roy was pursuing a semi-pro career with the hope of further advancement, he suddenly suffered a serious health incident, a severe bout of heat stroke. This was more than just a simple bout of heat exhaustion. It was a serious medical condition that caused a series of debilitating symptoms that lasted for a long time. Roy suffered from dizziness, nausea, severe headaches, and, most importantly, a severe physical decline that left his body, once a symbol of strength and endurance from his basketball and baseball years, weak, easily fatigued, and unable to sustain any exertion. Mentally, the situation was even worse. He fell into a state of anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and insomnia, leaving his once competitive mind shrouded in darkness and self-doubt. This heat stroke was no fleeting event. It lasted for months, even years, turning Roy's life into a series of bedridden days at his family home in Fountain City, Tennessee. His big league dreams, like a tryout with the New York Yankees that he had once held in his grasp, disappeared under the very sunlight that had fueled his peak performance. For Roy, the disappointment and despair must have been immense, because everything he had worked so hard to build, from his athletic skills honed as a child to his network of relationships in the local baseball world, was shattered in the blink of an eye. It was in this dark, quiet space that the music found him. To combat the crushing boredom and melancholy, his mother brought out his father's old fiddle. At first it was just a diversion, something to occupy his hands and his mind. He wasn't a natural musician in the way he was a natural athlete. It was a struggle. His first attempts were likely a cacophony of screeching, out-of-tune notes. But he persisted. He mimicked the old-time tunes he'd heard all his life, slowly, painstakingly teaching his fingers to find the melodies. The fiddle became his therapist, his companion. It was a way to channel the powerful emotions swirling inside him, the grief for his lost future, the frustration of his physical limitations. He wasn't just playing notes, he was pouring his pain and his heart into the instrument. This period of forced stillness, a tragedy in the eyes of a young athlete, became the crucible in which the king of country music was forged. Without the sunstroke, the world would have likely known Roy Acuff, the baseball player. Because of it, we were given Roy Acuff, the legend. As his health slowly returned, so did a new sense of purpose. The baseball diamond was a closed door, but music was opening a new one. In the early 1930s, Acuff took a step that would prove crucial in his development as a performer. He joined a traveling medicine show. It was a tough, unpredictable life, a far cry from the glamour of the stage. Here, performing on the back of a flatbed truck for skeptical, hard-working crowds, Acuff learned the art of showmanship. He learned how to capture an audience's attention, how to make them laugh, and most importantly, how to make them feel something. He learned to project his voice, to engage directly with the people in front of him, and to sell not just the medicine, but himself. One of his signature moves was born in this era, balancing his fiddle bow on his nose. It was a simple homespun trick, but it was memorable, and it showed his innate understanding that entertainment was about more than just singing a song. The medicine shows were his boot camp, stripping away any pretense and teaching him the raw fundamentals of connecting with an audience. After his time on the medicine show circuit, Acuff's musical journey led him to Knoxville, where he and his new band, the Tennessee Cracker Jacks, landed a spot on the popular radio show Midday Merry-Go-Round on WROL. This was a significant step up. Here, he began to refine his sound and build a loyal regional following. But Nashville and the Grand Ole Opry was the ultimate prize. In 1937, he got his first shot. He and the band drove to Nashville, filled with hope, for an audition with the Opry's formidable manager, George D. Hay, known as the Solemn Old Judge. The audition was a disaster. Acuff, nervous and eager to impress, chose to perform "Turn Your Radio On," a popular song of the day. But his raw, emotional style didn't fit the smoother, more polished sound that Hay was cultivating at the time. The judge was unimpressed, and Acuff and his band were sent packing back to Knoxville, their Nashville dreams seemingly dashed. It was a stinging rejection. But Roy Acuff was no stranger to disappointment. He had lost his first dream to sunstroke. He wasn't about to let one man's opinion kill his second. He returned to Knoxville, but with a renewed fire. It was during this period that he and his band, now renamed the Smoky Mountain Boys, had a stroke of genius. They recorded a song that would become his signature anthem, "The Great Speckled Bird." Based on a Bible verse, the song was a powerful allegory for the persecution of the faithful, a theme that resonated deeply with his devout rural audience. The record was a massive hit. Another song, the rollicking train-themed Wabash Cannonball, also caught fire. The Opry couldn't ignore him any longer. The public was demanding to hear the man behind these powerful new songs. In 1938, Roy Acuff was invited back to the Grand Ole Opry, not for an audition, but as a featured performer. This time, he didn't try to be what he thought they wanted. He was simply himself. He strode onto the Ryman stage, fiddle in hand, and launched into "The Great Speckled Bird." The effect was electric, his voice untrained but filled with a raw, almost painful sincerity, cut through the air. It wasn't just a performance, it was a testimony. The audience was transfixed. Here was a sound that was different. It was more intense, more deeply rooted in the mournful mountain traditions than anything the Opry had heard before. When he finished, the Remen erupted. The applause was thunderous, and the demand for encores was overwhelming. Roy Acuff had arrived, and the Grand Ole Opry would never be the same. Roy Acuff's appearance was not only a personal event, but also marked a seismic shift in the historical direction of this iconic radio show. At the time, the Opry was largely dominated by string bands like those of Uncle Dave Macon and Arthur Smith, with a primary emphasis on instrumental virtuosity. Performances at the time were often ensemble style, with singers playing supporting roles to the instruments, reflecting the nascent hillbilly music scene, which focused on Appalachian traditions with little emphasis on emotional individuality. Acuff, however, radically reversed this trend. He emerged as a true frontman, a lead singer who put the emotional power of his lyrics and voice at the center of his performance, transforming the Opry from a collective instrumental program into a platform for individual singer stardom. He was the Opry's first true superstar. He brought a new level of showmanship and emotional intensity. He would often cry on stage when singing a particularly heartbreaking ballad, and it wasn't a performance. He felt the song so deeply that the emotions just came flooding back. This vulnerability created an unbreakable bond with the audience. They saw him not as a distant star, but as one of them, someone who understood their struggles and their faith. His band, the Smoky Mountain Boys, was an integral part of this new sound. They were a cast of memorable characters, combining musical talent and theatrical humor, balancing heavy emotional performances with light entertainment, a formula that has helped the Opry maintain its wide appeal. Most notable was Clell Summy, who played the dobro and created a comical character as Cousin Jody, often dressed in flamboyant costumes and telling country jokes to lighten the mood between ballads. His role was not only as a musician but also as a humorous narrator, adding to the variety of the Opry show. Also present was Pete Kirby, 1911 to 2002, the talented banjo player known as Bashful Brother Oswald, who joined the band in 1938 after replacing Arthur Smith. Oswald's deep, rumbling voice became a signature part of Acuff's sound, especially on songs like Wabash Cannonball, where he took on backing vocals and played the dobro with a unique slide technique. Oswald and Summy's pioneering use of the dobro as a lead instrument in country music was revolutionary, as noted in bluegrass history, as the dobro, with its metallic resonant sound, was more common in Hawaiian blues, but was adapted to add emotional depth to mountain folk songs, distinguishing the Smoky Mountain Boys from other bands with its blend of tradition and innovation. Together they created a sound that was both traditional and emotionally new, a perfect blend of mournful, religious ballads and upbeat jams that helped propel the Opry into a new era, with soaring concert and record sales, defining modern country music with its emphasis on personal emotion and performance variety. But Roy Acuff was more than just a performer. He was a visionary. In an era when artists were routinely exploited by record labels and publishers, Acuff understood the importance of controlling his own destiny. In 1942, he partnered with the gifted songwriter Fred Rose to form Acuff Rose Publications. This wasn't just another business venture, it was a game changer for Nashville. At the time, the music publishing world was dominated by the big firms of Tin Pan Alley in New York. Acuff Rose became the first major country music publishing house based in Nashville, laying the groundwork for the city to become Music City, USA. Their philosophy was simple but radical: to nurture and protect songwriters. They treated them as partners, not just employees, and their timing was impeccable. Shortly after they opened their doors, a young, rail-thin, and prodigiously talented singer-songwriter from Alabama walked into their office. His name was Hank Williams. Acuff and Rose immediately recognized his genius. They signed him, championed his songs, and helped him navigate the treacherous waters of the music business. The partnership between Acuff Rose and Hank Williams produced some of the most iconic songs in the history of American music, from Lovesick Blues to I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. Acuff's business acumen ensured that the creative heart of country music would have a home and a protector right in the heart of Nashville. As Acuff's star rose, so did his country's turmoil. During the World War II, his music became a source of comfort and a taste of home for millions of American soldiers stationed overseas. In a fascinating and often told tale, it's said that during the Battle of Okinawa, Japanese forces would scream taunts at the American Marines, shouting things like, "To hell with Roosevelt, to hell with Babe Ruth." The Marines in turn would shout back, "To hell with Hirohito, to hell with Roy Acuff." While the story may be apocryphal, the fact that it was told at all speaks to how deeply Acuff had become ingrained in the American identity. He was as much a symbol of home as baseball and the president. After the war, Acuff's popularity was so immense that it spilled over into the political arena. In 1948, he stunned many by accepting the Republican nomination for governor of Tennessee. He ran a grassroots campaign, often performing a few songs before giving his stump speech. While he was ultimately unsuccessful against the powerful Democratic machine of the time, his candidacy was a testament to his stature and the deep connection he had with the people of his home state. For Roy, It was less about political ambition and more about a sense of civic duty, a desire to serve the people who had given him so much. The 1950s were truly the golden age of Roy Acuff and the Grand Ole Opry, marking the height of his career amid the country music revival following World War II and the Great Depression, with the Opry becoming a national icon through its WSM radio broadcasts, attracting millions of weekly viewers. Acuff was not only a singer, but also a respected figure in the industry. Acuff helped transform the Opry from a group show model to a star-studded format, with soulful vocals and fiddles at the center, helping the show expand from a Nashville locale to a national phenomenon, especially in the post-war economic climate, when country music became a source of spiritual comfort for rural workers and veterans. He continued to record hits such as Wabash Cannonball, re-recorded in 1947, and Night Train to Memphis, 1942, maintained steady vinyl sales through Columbia Records, and co-founded Acuff Rose Music in 1942 with Fred Rose, Nashville's first music publishing company, which became the foundation of the city's music industry, supporting artists such as Hank Williams and expanding the copyright market. His respect was not only from audiences but also from critics, with traveling shows and Hollywood films such as Smoky Mountain Melody, 1948, cementing his status as a cultural icon representing the authentic hillbilly heritage. But as the decade drew to a close and the 1960s began, the cultural winds began to change dramatically, reflecting the great shifts in post-war American society, with rapid urbanization leading to a diversification of musical tastes. A new generation was coming of age and their tastes were changing. The raw sound of rock and roll, pioneered by artists like Elvis Presley, who was once advised to go back to driving a truck after an Opry audition, was captivating young people across the country. In Nashville, a distinct evolution was taking place. Producers like Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley began to develop what became known as the Nashville sound. They sought to broaden the appeal of country music by softening its rough edges. They replaced the fiddles and steel guitars with smooth strings, backing choruses, and polished vocals from artists like Patsy Cline and Jim Reeves. The result was a more refined, pop-influenced sound that achieved enormous commercial success. And in this new, polished Nashville, Roy Acuff, the man who embodied the raw, rustic sound of the mountains, began to seem like a relic from a bygone era. His music, once the very definition of country, is now labeled classic or country. The change has been slow but steady. He's watched younger artists, some of whom he's mentored, adopt the new style and find fame. He remains a beloved icon at the Opry, a respected veteran, but he's no longer the commercial center of the genre he helped create. He saw the Nashville sound not necessarily as bad, but as something fundamentally different, something that was losing the soulful, heartfelt honesty that had been the music's bedrock. He once remarked in an interview, "They've changed my music. They've put a beat to it, and they've taken the story out of it, and I don't like it." It was a simple, direct statement, but it held the weight of a man watching his life's work be subtly erased. While the outlaw movement of the 70s with Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson would later rebel against the Nashville sound in a much more confrontational way, Acuff's was a quieter, more dignified resistance. He simply continued to be himself. He kept the fiddle and the banjo at the forefront of his band. He kept singing the old songs with the same raw emotion he always had. He became a living monument to traditional Opry, a steadfast anchor in a sea of change. The move of the Grand Ole Opry from the historic Ryman Auditorium to the new, modern Grand Ole Opry House in 1974 was a deeply symbolic moment. For Acuff, it was bittersweet. He loved the Ryman. Its history was intertwined with his own. On the final night at the old auditorium, he reportedly wept, but he also understood the need for progress. As the undisputed patriarch of the show, he was a key figure in the transition, providing a bridge between the past and the future. In a famously symbolic gesture, he cut a circle from the Ryman's stage to be inlaid in the center of the new stage, ensuring that the spirit of the mother church would live on. He was the first performer on the new stage, a fitting tribute to the man who had been the Opry's heart for so long. The final decades of Roy Acuff's life were marked by a quiet grace and an encroaching sense of loneliness. He was universally beloved, a living legend who received the Kennedy Center Honors and the National Medal of Arts. He had his own museum at Opryland and remained an active performer on the Opry stage well into his 80s. But he was also a man out of time. He outlived his wife, Mildred, his partner of over 45 years. He watched as his contemporaries, the friends and musical comrades who had shared the journey with him, passed away one by one. Ernest Tubb, Bill Monroe, Minnie Pearl, the faces that had defined the Opry for generations, were disappearing. On a chilly Monday morning in November 1992, in a hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, a heart stopped beating after 89 years of service. The cause was determined to be congestive heart failure, an illness he had battled for years. His death, though not unexpected given his failing health, left an unfillable void in Nashville and the hearts of millions of fans around the world. His passing was not a tumultuous event, but rather a gentle extinguishing of a flame that had burned brightly for decades. As soon as the news of his death spread, a wave of grief swept across Music City. Those who had worked with him, artists he had inspired, and music industry leaders came together to share their memories and tributes. Radio stations across the country interrupted their routines to play his timeless songs, Wabash Cannonball, The Great Speckled Bird, Pins and Needles, In My Heart, and share stories about his legacy. For millions of fans who knew Roy Acuff only through radio or concerts, the sadness was no less profound. He was the voice of their families, a link to their roots and traditions. Older fans felt like they had lost a close friend, someone who had been with them through life's ups and downs. Many made pilgrimages to Nashville, leaving flowers and messages at the Grand Ole Opry and at the gravesite that Acuff himself had prepared years earlier. Roy Acuff's death was not a sudden tragedy, but the peaceful passing of a man who had lived a full life. He is the king of country music. He captured its heart and soul so authentically and unwaveringly throughout his lifetime. Nashville has lost its king, but the kingdom he built will live on forever. Roy Acuff's ultimate legacy goes far beyond record sales or awards. His raw, soulful performance style set a standard for authenticity that influenced generations of singers. But perhaps his most enduring legacy is his role as the conscience of the Grand Ole Opry. Through all the changes, he has been a living link to the roots of the music, a constant reminder that the essence of country music is to tell the truth. Roy Acuff was more than the king of country. He was its moral compass, its beating heart, and his violin, though silent, will forever resonate.